In the cold hospital room, my mother looked the nurse straight in the eyes, pointed at me, and said with a gentle, almost loving smile, "Don't waste your time on her. She's just the hired help. The useless maid who only pretends she belongs here." Then, with trembling fingers, she pushed the document across the tray table, signed it slowly, and handed over my grandmother's house to my brother Caleb, the perfect son, the admired youth pastor who stands every Sunday preaching about love, loyalty, and family. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "God is so good." I adjusted her pillow. I held her fragile hand. I said nothing. What they didn't know was that their little act was about to collapse. Next Sunday, at exactly 10:30 a.m., inside the senior pastor's private office, I would make sure every lie, every betrayal, and every stolen dollar would be exposed, right before the church service began. My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 39 years old, and if you've ever been erased by your own family while they praised someone who never showed up, then you already understand the silence I carried in that room. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. To understand why I didn't react, why I didn't scream or throw that document back in her face, you have to understand what I had already spent years learning to live without. My world exists in a converted garage behind a small rental house on the west side of Fort Worth. It's not much to look at from the outside: cracked driveway, faded siding, a squeaky metal door. But inside, it's where I built something real, something honest. 3 walls are lined with foam panels I installed myself. The 4th has thick blackout curtains to keep the outside noise from bleeding in. A simple wooden desk sits in the center, worn at the edges from years of use. Suspended over it is a professional microphone, the kind that captures every breath, every pause, every truth people try to hide. That's where I've recorded over 170 episodes of my podcast. It's called Between the Doors. The show isn't about strangers disappearing into the world. It's about people who vanish inside their own families. The kind of disappearance no one reports. The kind where you're still invited to holidays, still included in group chats, still smiling in photos, but somehow no one really sees you anymore. Every story I've told begins with the same sentence: "I always knew, I just didn't have proof." For years, I built my career helping others find theirs. But I never imagined I would need to collect evidence against my own blood. While I sat in that garage, editing audio and listening to people confess the quiet ways they'd been erased, my brother Caleb stood under bright stage lights in front of thousands. His voice carried confidence, warmth, authority. People admired him, trusted him, believed every word he said. He spoke about forgiveness, about sacrifice, about family. And sometimes, just often enough, he spoke about a sister who had chosen ambition over loyalty. He never said my name. He didn't have to. In a city like Fort Worth, reputations travel faster than truth. I stopped attending his sermons years ago. But I never stopped watching. There's a difference between avoiding someone and making sure they never surprise you again. The last summer my father was alive, we sat on the back steps of my grandmother's house. It was late evening, the kind where the air still held heat from the day. He lit a cigarette, one of the many secrets he kept from my mother, and "Nat," he said quietly, without looking at me, "when I'm gone, keep everything, every receipt, every record." I laughed at first, thought he was being dramatic. But then he added something that stayed with me long after he was gone. "Your mother is building a story," he said, "and I don't think you're going to like the ending." He died less than a year later. At the time, I didn't realize he had already given me the beginning of my defense. The house on Larchmont Street wasn't just a house. It was history, brick walls filled with decades of memories. My grandmother raised her family there. My father grew up there. Every holiday, every birthday, every quiet Sunday afternoon, it all lived inside those rooms. When she got sick, everything changed. She was 82 when the doctors told her she didn't have much time left. But she didn't slow down the way people expected. She still drove, still dressed herself neatly, still carried that quiet strength that made everyone else feel smaller without her ever raising her voice. One afternoon, she asked me to drive her to a small shipping store across town. I thought she needed to mail something. She didn't explain, and I didn't ask. She carried a yellow legal pad in her purse, filled with her careful handwriting. At the store, she insisted I wait outside, said she needed to handle something alone. When she came back out, she looked lighter somehow, like she had just finished something important. She sat in the passenger seat, turned toward me, and took my hand. "The house will be yours," she said softly. "Your mother can stay as long as she needs, but it belongs to you." I remember staring at her, unsure how to respond. "You were the one who showed up," she added. "That matters more than people think." Not my mother. Not my brother. Some truths are safer when they're quiet. After she passed, everything moved slowly. Paperwork, legal processes, signatures. By the time it was finalized, the house was officially mine. But I didn't change anything. I left my mother's name on the bills, let her continue living there as if nothing had changed. I told myself it was kindness, respect. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was the first mistake that allowed her story to grow unchecked. Years passed. I paid every expense tied to that house: taxes, insurance, repairs. Every broken appliance, every leaking pipe, every upgrade it needed, I covered it. Quietly, consistently, without recognition. And for just as many years, my mother told people a different version of the truth. In her version, Caleb helped when he could. In her version, I was distant, detached, self-focused. In her version, she was the one holding everything together. I didn't argue. Because arguing with a lie that has already been believed rarely changes anything. Then came the moment everything shifted. It was a quiet December afternoon. I was sitting at her kitchen table, helping her file her taxes like I had done every year since my father passed. She wasn't good with computers, and I didn't mind stepping in. It felt routine, harmless, until I saw the numbers. A line buried in the documents stopped me cold. Rental income. Reported consistently over multiple years. From a tenant living in the house. I stared at the screen, my mind trying to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Tenant. That's what she had labeled me. Not daughter. Not caretaker. Not the person who had kept that house standing. A tenant. Someone who paid to be there. Someone who didn't belong. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It sharpened. Because that wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate story. And stories like that don't stay confined to tax forms. They spread. They grow. They become truth in the eyes of everyone who hears them. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't raise my voice or demand an explanation. Because by then, I understood something important. If she could rewrite my role on official records, then she could rewrite my entire existence anywhere she wanted. So instead of the hospital didn't smell like sickness to me anymore. It smelled like timing, like the quiet seconds before something breaks wide open. By the fourth day, I knew the rhythm of my mother's room better than the nurses did. Morning vitals at 7:15, medication at 9, the slow shuffle of carts in the hallway, the way the fluorescent lights hummed just enough to make silence feel heavier. She barely looked at me unless she needed something: water, pillow adjustment, a blanket pulled higher over her legs. "Careful," she said once, as I fixed the edge of her gown. "You'll wrinkle it." "Not thank you." "Not please." Just instruction. Like I was exactly what she told the nurse I was. Helpful. Replaceable. Invisible. Caleb arrived that afternoon, right on schedule for visiting hours, dressed like he had just stepped off a stage, pressed shirt, polished shoes, that calm expression he wore like armor. He didn't rush in. He never rushed. Everything about him was measured, intentional. "Mom," he said softly, moving straight to her bedside. His voice shifted instantly, warmer, fuller, like he was already speaking to an audience. Her entire face changed when she saw him. There it was. The smile, the softness, the pride. All the things I had spent years trying to earn, given to him in a single second. "My boy," she whispered. He took her hand like it was fragile glass, like he was the only one who knew how to hold it properly. I stepped back, not dramatically, not noticeably, just enough to disappear into the background where I was expected to stand. "How are they treating you?" he asked her. "Oh, I've been through worse," she said, squeezing his fingers. "Now that you're here, I feel better already." Of course she did. He glanced at me then, just briefly, a polite acknowledgement, nothing more. "Natalie?" he said with a small nod. No warmth. No curiosity. No question about how long I'd been there. Just recognition. Like noticing a chair in the corner of the room. "I've been here," I said simply. "I'm sure you have," he replied, already turning back to her. And that was it. That was always it with him. He didn't need to argue or insult. He erased you by making you irrelevant. For the next 20 minutes he talked. About the church. About attendance numbers rising. About a new youth outreach program he was leading. Stories designed to impress. Carefully chosen details meant to reinforce exactly who he was in this family. The successful one. The visible one. The one worth talking about. My mother listened like every word mattered. Like his life was the only story that deserved to be told. Then, right on cue, the conversation shifted. "She's been helping," my mother said, gesturing vaguely in my direction without looking at me. Helping. Not taking care of me. Not handling everything. Just helping. Caleb smiled faintly. "That's good," he said. "Everyone should do what they can." Everyone should do what they can. I felt that sentence settle into my chest like something cold and sharp, because I knew exactly what it meant. It meant he believed his contributions, his occasional appearances, his words, his image, were equal to the years I had spent carrying everything no one else wanted to see. And maybe worse. It meant he didn't even realize the difference. A nurse entered the room shortly after, carrying a folder. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "we just need a signature for your discharge planning." My mother adjusted slightly, suddenly more alert. "Of course." The nurse placed the papers on the tray table. I recognized the look on my mother's face instantly. That careful focus. That subtle tightening around her mouth. She was thinking ahead, planning something. "Who will be listed as primary caregiver when you return home?" the nurse asked. There was a pause. Not long, just enough. But I noticed it. because I had lived in those pauses my entire life. My mother didn't look at me. She looked at Caleb. "Well," she said softly, "my son will make sure everything is arranged." Of course he would. Caleb nodded, calm as ever. "We'll make sure she's taken care of," he said. "We?" Not me. Not Natalie. "We?" A word that somehow included him, and excluded me at the same time. I didn't correct them, because something had already shifted inside me days ago when I saw those tax documents. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was coordination. A shared version of reality that didn't include me. Not as family, not as owner, not as truth. And if they could agree on that reality here, then how many other places had they already told it? The nurse handed my mother a pen. "Just sign here," she said kindly. My mother adjusted her grip, her fingers slightly unsteady, but her expression steady as ever. That same controlled smile. The one she used when she was presenting something as fact. She signed slowly, carefully. Then, without hesitation, she turned to Caleb and slid another document toward him. "This too," she said quietly. He didn't question it, didn't hesitate. Just picked up the pen. Signed. Done. Like it was routine. Like it had always been his to handle. I watched every second. Every movement. Every unspoken agreement passing between them. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about control. About rewriting history while I stood close enough to see it happen, but far enough to be dismissed if I spoke. The nurse gathered the papers and left the room. Silence settled in again. My mother leaned back against the pillows, satisfied. Caleb checked his watch. "I'll need to head back soon," he said. "Evening service prep." Of course. There was always somewhere more important for him to be. He stood, leaned down, and kissed her forehead again. "I'll take care of everything," he promised. "I know you will," she said softly. Then he turned to leave. But just before he reached the door, he paused. Looked back at me. "You should get some rest," he said. "You look tired." It sounded like concern. But it wasn't. It was dismissal. Permission to step away. A gentle suggestion that I had done enough. That I could go now. I held his gaze for a moment. Then I nodded. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "I will." He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. And for the first time that day, my mother looked directly at me. Really looked. Her eyes studied my face, searching for something. A reaction. A crack. A sign that I had finally understood my place. "What?" she asked, her tone calm but edged with something sharper underneath. I stepped closer to the bed. Not rushed. Not emotional. Controlled. Exactly the way she had taught me to be. "Nothing," I said softly. And I meant it. Because the moment for words had already passed. The room didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't just the silence, it was the weight of what had been said, what had been revealed, and what still hung unspoken between them. Ethan stood near the window, his hands clenched at his sides, staring out into the darkness as if answers might be written somewhere beyond the glass. But there was nothing there. just his own reflection, fractured, uncertain, and slowly realizing that the life he believed in had already begun to crumble. Behind him, Claire hadn't moved. She stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if looking up would make everything real in a way she wasn't ready to face. "You knew," Ethan said finally, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. "You knew this whole time, and you said nothing." Claire's lips parted, but no words came out at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't know everything." Ethan turned abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. "But you knew enough." She flinched, not from his volume, but from the truth behind his words. "I suspected," she admitted, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Things didn't add up. The money, the sudden changes, the way Daniel kept avoiding certain questions. "Daniel," Ethan repeated, almost bitterly, as if the name itself had turned sour. The man he trusted, the man he called family. The man who might have been orchestrating everything from the shadows. "You should have told me," Ethan said, quieter now, but somehow more intense. "I deserve to know." Claire finally looked up at him, and there was something in her eyes. Guilt, yes, but also fear. "I was trying to protect you." Ethan let out a hollow laugh. "Protect me? By letting me walk blind into this?" "No," she said quickly, stepping forward. "By giving me time to be sure. If I was wrong, if I accused him without proof, it would have destroyed everything." "And now," Ethan shot back, "what do you think this is doing?" Her silence answered him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension stretched thin, like a wire ready to snap. Then Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as he paced the room. "There's more," he said suddenly. Claire's head lifted slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan stopped, turning back toward her. "I found something else before you came in." Her heartbeat quickened. "What?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to make her uneasy, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "I wasn't sure what it meant at first," he said, holding it up. "But after what you just told me, it makes a lot more sense." Claire stepped closer, her eyes locked on the paper as if it might reveal everything. "Where did you get that?" Ethan's gaze hardened. "It was hidden in Daniel's office." The color drained from her face. "You went through his office?" "I had to," Ethan replied. "Something didn't feel right, and now I know why." He unfolded the document slowly, deliberately, as if giving the moment the gravity it deserved. Claire leaned in, her breath catching as she saw the contents. At first glance, it looked like a standard financial report, but the deeper she looked, the more disturbing it became. Unfamiliar accounts, untraceable transactions, and names. "This," she whispered, shaking her head. "This doesn't make sense." "It does," Ethan said quietly, "if you look at it the right way." Claire glanced up at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he continued, his voice steady now, "this wasn't just about money. It was about control." Her stomach tightened. Control? Over what? Ethan met her eyes. "Everything." The word hung in the air like a verdict. Claire stepped back, as if the truth itself had pushed her away. "No," she said, almost to herself. "That's not possible." "Isn't it?" Ethan challenged. "Think about it. The deals, the partnerships, the sudden influence he gained. None of it adds up unless there's something bigger behind it." Claire's mind raced, piecing together fragments she had ignored before. Late-night calls. Closed-door meetings. Secrets layered beneath secrets. And Daniel at the center of it all. "But why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why would he do this?" Ethan's expression darkened. "That's what we need to find out." A heavy silence followed. Then, slowly, Claire nodded. What do we do? Ethan looked down at the document again, then back at her. We don't confront him. Not yet. Claire frowned. Then what? We watch, he said. We gather everything we can. Proof, evidence, something solid enough that he can't talk his way out of it. And if he finds out, she asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we make sure we're ready before that happens. Claire studied him for a moment, seeing the determination in his eyes. This wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about survival. Okay, she said finally. I'm with you. Ethan gave a small nod, but there was no relief in it. Because deep down, they both knew. They had just stepped into something. The next morning came too quickly. Ethan hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the same thoughts replayed. Daniel's face, the hidden accounts, Claire's confession. Nothing made sense, and yet everything did. He stood in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Across the room, Claire entered quietly, her movements cautious, as if unsure what version of Ethan she would find. Morning, she said softly. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Then, without looking at her, he said, We need to act normal. Claire paused. What? If Daniel is involved in something this big, Ethan continued, then the last thing we can afford is to make him suspicious. Claire nodded slowly. Right. Ethan finally turned to face her. Can you do that? He asked. Pretend like everything's fine? She hesitated, but only for a moment. Yes, she said. I can. Ethan studied her, searching for doubt, but found none. Good, he said, because if we're going to bring him down... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Claire understood. Later that day, the atmosphere shifted again. Daniel arrived. And with him, the tension returned, stronger than ever. Ethan, Daniel greeted with a warm smile, as if nothing in the world was wrong. Good to see you. Ethan forced a smile in return. You too. Claire stood nearby, her posture composed, but her eyes sharp, observant. Watching. Waiting. Daniel moved through the room with ease, completely unaware, or perhaps pretending to be, of the storm brewing beneath the surface. How have things been? He asked casually. Busy, Ethan replied. You know how it is. Daniel chuckled. Always. But there was something in his eyes. Something subtle. Something calculating. And for the first time, Ethan saw it clearly. The man he once trusted without question now felt like a stranger. As the conversation continued, every word felt like a test. Every glance a hidden message. Claire noticed it too. The way Daniel's gaze lingered just a second too long. The way his questions seemed harmless, but carried weight underneath. He knows something. The thought crept into her mind uninvited. Or at least, he suspects. Her pulse quickened. Stay calm. That's what Ethan said. Act normal. But normal felt impossible when the truth was sitting right in front of them, smiling like nothing had changed. Claire, Daniel said suddenly, turning toward her. She stiffened slightly, but recovered quickly. Yes? Everything all right? He asked, his tone light. Too light. Of course, she replied with a small smile. Why wouldn't it be? Daniel held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. then smiled back. No reason. But the way he said it didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like a warning. And in that moment, Claire realized something chilling. This wasn't just a game of secrets anymore. It was a game of who would break first. And the worst part? She wasn't sure they were ready to win. Outside, the sky began to darken, clouds gathering as if reflecting the storm inside. Inside the house, 3 people stood in the same space, but on completely different sides of the truth. And none of them trusted the other anymore. The lines had been drawn. The tension was rising. And the air felt heavier that evening. Not because anything had changed on the surface, but because everything underneath had. Ethan could feel it in the way Daniel moved. Calm, controlled, almost too perfect. It was the kind of calm that didn't come from innocence. It came from confidence. The kind of confidence a man has when he believes he's always one step ahead. And that thought alone was enough to keep Ethan on edge. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. The clinking of cutlery against plates sounded louder than usual, echoing in the tension-filled space. Claire kept her eyes mostly on her plate, careful, calculated, every movement measured. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease. "So," he said casually, taking a sip of water, "we should talk about Sunday." Ethan's grip tightened slightly around his fork. Sunday. The church event. The gathering. The place where everything connected. "What about it?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone neutral. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying him. "It's important. A lot of people will be there. People who matter." There it was again. That subtle emphasis. Ethan forced a small nod. "I know." "I want everything to go smoothly," Daniel continued. "No surprises." Claire felt her chest tighten. No surprises. The words sounded simple, but beneath them there was something else. Something sharper. Something deliberate. Ethan met Daniel's gaze. "Of course," he said. "Why wouldn't it?" For a brief moment, the room went completely still. Daniel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later that night, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with urgency. Ethan closed the door behind him as Claire stepped into the room. "He knows." Claire didn't even hesitate. "You felt it too." Ethan nodded. "Maybe not everything, but enough." She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady the unease rising inside her. "Then we're running out of time." Ethan walked toward the table, spreading out the documents he had collected. "There's something we're missing," he said. "Something that connects all of this." Claire moved closer, her eyes scanning the papers again. Transactions, names, locations, pieces of a puzzle that still refused to fully come together. "What if Sunday isn't just an event?" she said slowly. Ethan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "What if it's the moment?" she continued. "The reason behind all of this. The place where everything happens." The realization hit Ethan like a sudden jolt. The church. The gathering. The people Daniel said mattered. It wasn't just social. It was strategic. "You're right," he said quietly. "It's not just a meeting. It's a setup." Claire's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Then whatever he's planning, it's going to happen there." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then that's where we end it." The next 2 days passed like a slow-burning storm. Every interaction with Daniel felt like walking on thin ice. Every word carried weight. Every glance felt like a test. But the deeper they looked, the more they found. Hidden accounts tied to influential names. Large sums moving in patterns that didn't make sense, unless you knew where to look. And one final detail. One name that appeared again and again. A name neither of them expected. Claire stared at it, her breath catching. This can't be right. Ethan's expression hardened. But it is. The truth was no longer hiding. It was staring them directly in the face. And it changed everything. Sunday arrived. The sky was clear. Too clear. As if the world itself had no idea what was about to unfold. The church stood tall, its presence calm, almost peaceful. A place meant for faith, for trust, for truth. But today, it was something else. People began to gather, dressed neatly, speaking in polite tones, unaware of the storm hidden beneath the surface. Ethan and Claire arrived together. Composed. Careful. Ready. Remember, Ethan said quietly, without looking at her. We don't act until we're sure. Claire nodded. And when we are? Ethan's eyes darkened slightly. We don't hold back. Inside, the atmosphere felt different. Warm smiles. Friendly greetings. But underneath it all, power. Influence. Secrets. Claire scanned the room, recognizing faces she had seen in the documents. People with connections. People with authority. People who shouldn't have been linked to something like this. And yet, they were all here. Together. Like pieces of the same hidden machine. Impressive, isn't it? Claire froze. Daniel's voice. Right behind her. She turned slowly, forcing a smile. It's something. Daniel stepped beside her, his gaze sweeping across the room. A lot of important people in one place, he said. Opportunities like this don't come often. Ethan joined them, his posture calm but his eyes sharp. Depends on what you're looking for, he said. Daniel glanced at him, a faint smirk forming. And what are you looking for, Ethan? Heavy. Loaded. Ethan didn't look away. The truth. For a split second, something shifted. Daniel's expression didn't change completely. But the mask cracked just enough. Just enough to reveal what was underneath. And it wasn't friendly. Moments later, the gathering began to settle. People took their seats. The atmosphere quieted. But the tension, it only grew stronger. Claire leaned slightly toward Ethan. This is it. Ethan nodded faintly. Stay close. At the front, Daniel moved into position. Confident. Controlled. Like a man about to deliver something important. Something planned. Something final. Ethan watched him carefully. Every movement. Every expression. Waiting. Because deep down, he knew whatever Daniel was about to do would reveal everything. Daniel stepped forward, addressing the room. His voice was calm, steady, convincing. The kind of voice people trusted. Thank you all for coming, he began. Today is not just a gathering. It's a moment of alignment, of unity, of shared vision. Claire's heart pounded. This wasn't just a speech. It was something else. Something bigger. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Listen carefully, he murmured. Daniel continued. We all understand the value of influence, of direction, of shaping outcomes. The words were subtle, but the meaning behind them was not. This world doesn't move on chance, Daniel said. It moves on decisions, on control. Claire's breath caught. There it was. The truth, hidden in plain sight. And suddenly, everything made sense. Ethan stepped forward slightly. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to be ready. Now? Claire whispered. Ethan didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked on Daniel. Watching. Waiting. Because timing was everything. And then, Daniel said something that changed everything. Some of you here already know the truth, he said, his gaze shifting across the room. Then, it stopped. On Ethan. On Claire. A slow smile spread across his face. And some of you are just beginning to understand it. The room felt like it tilted. Claire's stomach dropped. He knows. Ethan's pulse spiked, but his face remained calm. Because now, there was no doubt. This wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a trap. And they had just walked straight into it. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one else seemed to notice. But Ethan and Claire did. Because they weren't just part of the audience anymore. They were part of the story. And Daniel, he was done hiding. Ethan took a slow step forward. Claire grabbed his arm slightly. Ethan. But he didn't stop. Because this moment, this exact moment, was where everything changed. Ethan's footsteps echoed louder than they should have. Each step forward felt like crossing an invisible line, one that separated silence from truth, fear from exposure. Claire's grip on his arm tightened for a moment, then slowly released. Because she knew this was it. There was no waiting anymore. No more watching. No more pretending. Daniel's eyes followed Ethan as he stepped into clearer view. That same calm expression remained on his face. But now it wasn't welcoming. It was expectant. Almost amused. Ethan, Daniel said smoothly, tilting his head slightly. Is there something you'd like to say? The room shifted. A few heads turned. Whispers barely began, but curiosity had already been sparked. Ethan stopped just a few feet away. Close enough to see it clearly now. The mask was gone. And beneath it was the man he never truly knew. Yes, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. There is. Claire stepped forward too, standing beside him, not behind. Not anymore. Daniel glanced between them, the faintest smile playing on his lips. Then by all means, he said. This is a place of truth, after all. The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. Is it? He replied quietly. That was the first crack. Small, but noticeable. Daniel's smile didn't fade, but it didn't grow either. Careful, he said softly. You don't want to say something you can't take back. Ethan let out a slow breath. I don't think you understand, he said. There's nothing left to take back. And then he reached into his jacket. The movement alone was enough to shift the energy in the room. Claire felt her heartbeat in her throat. Daniel's eyes dropped briefly to Ethan's hand. And for the first time, something flickered. Not fear, but awareness. Ethan pulled out the documents. The same ones. The truth. Exposed in ink and numbers and names. You built all of this, Ethan said, holding them up. Not just for Daniel, but for everyone. Not for unity, not for vision. His voice sharpened. But for control. The word landed. Heavy. Unavoidable. A murmur spread through the crowd now, confused, uncertain. Daniel didn't react immediately. He simply looked at the papers, then back at Ethan. And then he smiled. But this time, it was different. Colder. You think you understand what you're holding? Daniel asked. I know exactly what it is, Ethan replied. Hidden accounts, influential names, money being moved in ways it shouldn't be. Claire stepped in, her voice firm despite the tension. We've seen enough to know this isn't just business. It's manipulation. Now the room was fully alert. Eyes shifting. People listening. Because something real was happening now. Something they couldn't ignore. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then laughed. Softly at first. Then just enough for it to carry. You've always been passionate, Ethan, he said. Ethan didn't move. Then explain it, he challenged. Explain why your name is tied to every one of these transactions. Silence. The kind that presses in from all sides. Daniel looked around the room briefly, at the people watching, waiting. Then back at Ethan. And something in his posture shifted. Not defensive. Not nervous. But revealing. You want the truth? He asked. Ethan's voice didn't waver. That's why I'm here. Daniel nodded slowly. Then listen carefully. He stepped forward. Not away from the accusation, but into it. Yes, he said calmly, the accounts are real. A ripple went through the room. Claire felt her breath catch. Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the papers. And yes, Daniel continued, the influence is intentional. More whispers. More confusion. More tension. But what you fail to see, Daniel said, his voice rising just enough to command attention, is that none of this is random. He gestured subtly around the room. These people, this network, this structure. His eyes locked onto Ethan again. It's necessary. Ethan's jaw tightened. Necessary for what? Daniel didn't hesitate. For control. The same word. But now, coming from him. Owned. Unapologetic. Claire felt a chill run through her. You're admitting it, she said. I'm not hiding it, Daniel replied. And that was worse. Far worse. This world doesn't reward honesty, Daniel continued, his voice calm but powerful. It rewards strategy, influence, direction. He took another step closer. You think chaos fixes itself? He asked. You think systems run on trust alone? Ethan shook his head slightly. This isn't about fixing anything. It's about power. Daniel smiled faintly. And what do you think power is, Ethan? The question lingered. But Ethan didn't answer. Because This was exposure. Claire stepped forward again, her voice stronger now. You used people. You manipulated outcomes. You built this whole thing in secret. Daniel looked at her, almost disappointed. I built stability, he said. I created order where there was none. By controlling everything, she shot back. Yes. No hesitation. No guilt. Just truth. And that truth was colder than any lie. The room was no longer calm. People were whispering openly now. Some stepping back. Some looking at Daniel differently. Because whether they understood it fully or not, they felt it. Something wasn't right. Ethan lowered the papers slightly. His voice changed. Less anger. More clarity. You didn't trust anyone, he said. That's the truth, isn't it? Daniel didn't respond immediately. You built all of this because you believed no one else could be trusted to do it right. A pause. Then Daniel spoke. Because I was right. That was it. The final piece. The core of everything. Ethan nodded slowly. Not in agreement, but in understanding. And that's where you failed. For the first time, Daniel's expression shifted. Slightly. But enough. You think exposing this changes anything? Daniel asked. Ethan looked around the room. At the people. At the doubt. At the cracks forming. It already has. Claire stepped beside him again. You wanted control, she said. But control built on fear, on secrecy. She shook her head. It doesn't last. Daniel's gaze hardened. You're naive. Maybe, Ethan said, but at least we're honest. Silence fell again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't empty. It was shifting. Because the truth was no longer hidden. It was out. Seen. Heard. And impossible to ignore. Daniel looked around one last time. At the room he once controlled. At the people who once followed without question. And for the first time, he wasn't in control of what came next. Ethan took a breath. Then spoke, not just to Daniel, but to everyone. The truth isn't something you control, he said. It's something you face. No anger. No shouting. Just truth. Clear. Simple. Final. Claire's voice followed, softer, but just as powerful. And trust isn't built in secret. The moment settled. And in that stillness, everything changed. Daniel said nothing more. Because there was nothing left to say. Outside, the light of the day remained bright. Unchanged. But inside, something had shifted. Something real. Ethan and Claire walked out together. Not victorious. Not triumphant. But free. Because the truth had cost them something. Trust. Illusions. Certainty. But it had given them something too. Clarity. And that was enough. And in the end, the lesson was simple. Control built in darkness will always collapse in the light. But truth, no matter how... And in the end, the truth didn't destroy him. It simply revealed that he was never who they